Good evening. Welcome to Live with Dawn Butler. And joining me on the sofa today, I have Arran Marshall, 27-year-old support worker. And we're going to be talking about his journey, his life in Brent, what he does now and why he does it. Don't forget, if you want to join in the debate, then all you have to do is make a phone call, 0203 397 2095, or if you're Facebooking, Star Media Corporation, and if you're on YouTube, don't forget Star Media Corp, and if you're tweeting, it's Star Media Corp, hashtag Live with Dawn Butler. So, good evening, Arran. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's great to have you on. Thank you for coming on. So, you're 27 years old.
That's correct.
Tell me a little bit about your life. You're a support worker. What's made you become a support worker?
Well, throughout my life, I've had many difficult moments, and I thought being a support worker is the best way to share my experience, to really help people, to empower people to do the best things for themselves.
And your age group is 16 to 18?
Yeah, that's the age group I focus on. And I think that is a key age as well, because you're entering into adulthood at that stage, and that's the real time in life where you want to give it your best shot in terms of correcting what may have gone wrong or making just a forward step into progress. So that's the age I focus on.
What makes you think that young people, 16 to 18-year-olds, are going to relate to you?
Again, based on the fact I'm only 27 now, so it's not as if it's somebody of the older generation, someone their parents' age speaking to them. I'm speaking to them almost as a peer, somebody that they can relate to in the sense of when they do things, they know that I may have done those things. They may that I could even be in the same similar situation as them. So there's a real automatic understanding there that we are of a similar age and we do share similar experiences.
So what made you, because a lot of the 16, 18-year-olds, if you're a support worker, that means that they're kind of troubled. That's why they're in the system.
Yes.
What sort of trouble did you get into when you were 16 or 18?
Well, I mean, I got into loads of trouble actually.
Okay.
Enough trouble, I would say. The first time I got arrested, I was 16 years old. The second time I got arrested, I was 16 years old.
Wow.
Because it was only a week later.
Okay.
So, I mean, I went
What was that
through
for? Why did you get arrested?
my period. Well, I was accused of theft.
Okay.
And again, it's these situations you get yourself into. In the end, I ended up going to court and no evidence was offered against me. So I have no convictions or anything like that.
Right.
So I've done really well in that sense, that even though I found myself in many situations, I've done my best, and that's what I try to put down. That's the message I try to put across to young people now, is that do your best in every situation, and even though you could be facing charges for something you didn't do, you can fight those charges, you can do the best you can. You may have messed up at school. My own experience, I left high school with hardly any qualifications now. Back then had nothing at all really, I would say. Didn't know what was really ahead of me, but again, I had to have a certain amount of positive thought, and I think that's what got me through the troublesome times, really.
Yeah. And you're also an athlete as well.
Yeah, that's correct. I got into athletics at the age of 14 years old.
Right. What was that? Running and.
Yeah, running. It was 1,500 meters. That was the event.
Okay, that's long.
And yeah, it's long, but I was up for the challenge actually. What I would say to you about that, there's even an interesting story that I do tell many people. I was asked to just do a competition for my school. And I had something which I call the power of ignorance. And the reason I say the power of ignorance is I was actually competing against the best runner in the whole of Britain in my age group. Right. And I didn't know that. Right. But I still had the mentality that I'm going to win this race. It's my first time ever doing anything like this at a competitive level. And I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to try to beat everyone that's in my path. In the end, I didn't win. But I ran so well that I ran like a national grade standard. They give you grade standard. So I ran national grade standard 4. There was only 4 standards. So I ran the bottom one, but it was still a real achievement. Right. Immediately after the race, I was pulled in and asked if I already run for a club. I was scouted on the spot, details taken, got told I'm competing for the club this Saturday coming.
Wow.
No messing about. But again, that came because I didn't get caught up in who's good, who should be beating me, none of that. I said, I'm going to give this my best shot. And what that has led to has been the greatest ripple effect in my life, really.
Okay.
Simply because I don't think I would be in the positive position I am now if that didn't happen. I mean, every time something's gone wrong within my life, I've always had the discipline. I've always had that base to come back to, athletics. I've always had that. So that has really been the core of my strength, basically.
Where do you think that also comes from? Do you think that comes from your parents? Do you think they also instilled that kind of drive and determination in you to say, you know, Arran, you go out and you do your best?
I think there's an aspect of that. That is the initial focus. And I think it's always best if your parents can really instill that in you, can really instill that winning competitive mentality. But for myself, I wouldn't necessarily say it comes directly from my parents. I think it's when I got out into the world and really explored. And that's what I would almost say to more young people and other people in society. You don't have to have the perfect background. You don't necessarily have to have parents that have installed these great values in you. You can actually go out there and empower yourself with a positive mentality. Obviously, you have to look for role models and you have to look for some sort of father figure and mother figure. But just because you don't have it at the moment doesn't mean you can't find it.
Because that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because they say that where a lot of fathers are absent, that's why lots of young black men go off the rails and do all kinds of things.
Yeah, and I would say there's a massive part of that. I mean, my biological father, he had pretty much left me before I could have any memory of him.
Right.
To this day, I've never received an incoming phone call from him. So again, I think without that father figure there, or your biological father figure there, there is the real opportunity to go crazy and to you've already been abandoned. So you kind of do feel a little bit mad at the world. You feel as if there's a force against you almost, because if the person that created me, I'm half of that person. And if they're not in my circles now, they're not around me, I don't see them, I don't have that influence, you automatically feel a bit wayward and off balance. And I think you take that with your persona going forward. But again, there has to be some sort of centering. And it goes back to just what I was saying in the previous point about almost finding a base for yourself, finding a comfortable, positive position and finding father figures. And I found that, again, within my sport, within my coaches, within other parents, people that cared. And again, even within my mother, who was present as well.
Yeah.
So you do recover even from the worst starts,
Yeah.
I would say.
And I think it's important that we hear stories and we hear like your stories, your life story, because you know the media gets carried away with talking about young black men who don't have fathers in the households, and this is what they do and this is why they do it, and they do research and they go into the estates and they say, look, you know, what do you expect? And you know, and I know like after the break we'll be talking about prisons, etc. But you're kind of an example of somebody who on paper lots of people, including politicians and those in certain positions of power, will say you should have ended up wayward and in prison or on drugs or, you know, something else.
Yeah, and going back to that, I can remember, I think I got suspended from high school so many times. I think it might have been 9 suspensions in total.
Right.
And you've got to understand, 3 suspensions is enough to get permanently
So you got suspended
excluded.
How many times?
I'd say around 9 times.
Wow.
Yeah, 9 times. And it was always just some incident. I mean, I was never the type to be saying, okay, I'll fight you after school or something like that. I mean, I would just settle it right there and then on the spot. Let's get it done. And I think, again, not having the calculation, not having that sort of guidance, not having that experience given to me from, again, maybe the correct male figure led me to be
like that.
To be a bit wayward.
We've got a phone call. Let's see who's on the line. Good evening to you.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Farah Ibrahim, and I would like to actually raise the issues of benefit cut and the impact that it has on Mali. And people in Brent.
So I didn't catch all of that. You'd like to ask whether...
No, I want to comment from personal experience.
So from Arran's experience, how it affects the young Somali men in Brent?
Somali families in housing.
In housing?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Interesting question in terms of the Somali families in Brent and housing, especially for young people and housing. What's your views on that, the prospects of that?
Well, I think it's quite difficult.
Thank you for your question, sorry.
I think it's quite difficult. Most, I would say most Somalian youngsters here, a lot of them can be born in Britain. So they're only first generation Britons and some of them aren't. So to even know what sort of opportunities are out there for them is quite difficult. So they're not really that informed of what's going on. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be more information collected.
But is the whole weight of the system against young people? I mean, you're 27. I mean, there's, what chance have you got of buying a home or renting a home if you haven't got a really good job, I mean, that's a lot, and you have a lot of friends of different ilks. You have Muslim friends, you have white friends, black friends, Asian friends. How's your peer group? What do they feel about things like this?
Well, to be honest, at this moment, I think we're tired of almost being beaten down. At the moment, we're quite upbeat and thinking we actually have a great chance if we start empowering ourselves. For example, I've just gone back to university for a second time. I mean, I did get qualifications the first time. I've done a HNC the first time. I've gone back to start a psychology degree.
Wow.
I mean, and that...
So you're going back to university?
Yeah. And
well
again,
done.
These are the steps that I think all of us have to take. I said it to one of my friends the other day. You've almost got to realise that there is no magic cure out there, that things aren't just going to happen out of nowhere. You've got to take a time to work out a plan and to put some real focus into that and say, by the time I'm 35, by the time I'm 25, whatever age it may be, I'm going to get myself a house because I'm going to have created myself a good enough job by working really hard. I think the danger is to almost feel, like you're taking a beating. I think you've kind of got to understand you're in a bit of a contest. You're in a real battle, but you can actually win this. And I think that needs to be the
It's a very
mentality.
positive attitude that you have.
Yeah.
How does it get, because you do face a lot of challenges. So have you ever faced any challenges with the police? I'm just thinking of all the challenges, because some people will be listening to your story and think, well, he hasn't had that hard a life, you were suspended 9 times from school. What sort of experience have you had with police?
Okay, I've had many experiences with police. I think growing up, especially as a teenager, wearing the tracksuits, there's a stigma to you. That's how it is. That it's almost like you're tarred with a particular type of brush. I've had a police officer stop me and search me because I wouldn't look at him. I mean, I didn't even know he was there to be looked upon. I've had all of that.
So you're just going about your business, and the police officer stopped you because you didn't look at him.
Yep, I've had all of that. And again, in a situation like that, the way you react is important because now, if you react violently or if you react rudely, any form of aggression, they've got you. They've got you. It's understanding these things and understanding that you're going to have to use your brain. You're going to have to be a bit tactical at this point. Do you know what I mean? There's probably more of them than there is you. I mean, sometimes I look at the police and think they are actually the biggest gang in the UK.
Yeah.
If you really look at them, they're an organised network of people. They dress the same. They carry weapons. So it's all about being intelligent. I mean, I've had many runs with the police, and I've not just had it on a street level. I've had it in the point where it goes to the next level in the sense of, again, going to the courtroom, where an officer would say to you.
I think we've got a break, I think. We've got a phone call. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. And what's your name and what's your question?
I would like to make a point.
Yep, sure, make your point.
My point is by cutting this benefit, the problem is I hear echoes.
That's okay. We can hear you clearly.
Okay. I think the problem we have is when they do these cuttings, they motivate people in doing like robbery or stuff they would never have done before. Because before, if a person has a roof on his head and enough money, they wouldn't need certain things. But by doing this benefit cut, it's like they're pushing people to do bad stuff.
Okay. It's a good point. Okay, thank you for your question.
Yeah.
So the system
Mm-hmm.
is forcing people to do bad things.
Yeah.
The caller mentioned benefit cuts, and there are benefit cuts that came in on the 1st of April this year, and they're getting worse and worse. And so what she's saying is the system forces people to do bad things. Do you buy into that?
I buy into it to the degree. What I would say is, when these people are cutting the benefits, and what I mean by these people, I'm looking at the politicians that put this in place.
Mm-hmm.
People that have never experienced these types of living conditions before. They've never experienced it. They went to Oxford, they went to Cambridge. They tend to come from money. That's how I'm looking at the people that are putting these things in place. Yes, what they're doing is making you feel almost desperate. They're making you have to have this short-term thinking of how do I survive the next moment? How do I get by? But what you mustn't do is go down the route that is almost being designed for you. Again, what you have to do is take time to budget even further, and then to work out how you're going to get
maybe it's not that easy because money is so tight and you've still got the same outgoings and the government have given you less money. Prices for everything, food's going up, fuel's going up. It's just not that easy.
I mean, again, I read in the paper, food or heating. I mean, it's not the best option to be in at all. But I mean, all you can do is, again, we can try to get the people putting these rules on us, these laws on us, these cuts, making these cuts. We can try and get them out of power. But we've got to wait for a moment to do that. But in the meantime, you have to work out how you're going to survive. Because other than that, you go under. If you've got all this pressure being put on you and you don't work out what you're going to do to survive, you're going to go under. So you must take a moment. You must think, okay, I'm not going to steal. Even if I have to say, borrow from a friend in the short term, you may have to do those things. And it is desperate times and they do call for desperate measures. But what I would never advise or what I would never want to promote is doing something which will be to your further detriment. Don't go down that road.
So you think, okay, so you're saying that no matter what life throws at you, you have to keep a positive mind and a positive mentality.
You have to keep a positive mind, get yourself in a position, and then once you're in that position, you can remove the people that are almost oppressing you. You can remove those, but you must organise amongst yourself first. And that starts literally as the individual. You must make sure.
Do you think communities need to organise together so they're a powerful force together?
I think that has to happen, but I do appreciate that communities are being very much divided by these type of cuts and the fact that this person's got a job over here and this person hasn't. So at times, even though they're in the same community, even on the same street, this person feels he's a bit better than that person. So yes, there has to be a coming together, but there also, it must, and I'm stressing it, it must initially start with yourself, because you can't organise amongst the people if you're not organised yourself. So you have to sort yourself out, then get in collectively with everyone. Is
it that easy though? I mean, young people are probably just going to get more and more angry. You know, if they see their parents suffering, if they, you know, they see that there's less in the household, it's just going to get harder and harder.
It will get harder and harder, but again, you have to be harder and harder yourself. You have to rise to the challenge of almost, what do I say? You have to rise to the challenge of being somebody good within your community, making a way, showing people that there's other options, and you have to campaign for change as well. You have to campaign, you have to get out there and let people know of your situation. But I'm really trying to explain that you must be sure of what you're doing, and you must set a good example in the first place, because then it all falls down.
Yeah. Okay, well, what we're going to do, we'll have a break. Then after the break, we'll talk about some of the young people that you're going to be working with. We'll talk about prisoners and the rights to vote, and we'll take it up from there. So thank you very much, Arran. Thank you to everyone that's called in. Please continue to do so, and we'll see you back after the break. Don't forget the telephone number is 0203 397 2095. See you after the break. Good. Welcome back. So in this half of the segment, we're going to be talking about prisoners and the right to vote. Should prisoners be given the right to vote? Is it a right for them, or have they lost their liberty? So therefore, that means they've lost that right to vote. Arran Marshall, who's a support worker who's dealing with young people. Tell me, Arran, do you think that prisoners should have the right to vote?
I do feel prisoners should have the right to vote. And I would even say the European Court has said they do have the right to vote.
And do you not think that if you've done a crime, that means that you've lost your liberty, and part of your liberty and freedom is voting?
I think when you've committed a crime, you should be punished. And I think that's what prisons do. But I don't want to take the attitude of almost putting these people in a box and saying, can't vote, you're no longer in this society. They are still a part of the country. They're still going to come out at some point to a system that they need to have some sort of input on.
But suppose they didn't vote when they were outside of prison. Why should they be given a chance to vote now that they're inside of prison?
Well, the idea of prison is rehabilitation. And I would like to think, even though it doesn't happen on a large scale, not as much as it should, I would like to think some people do get rehabilitated in there. And coming into a social awareness, a political awareness, is a massive part of rehabilitation. And I think if you feel it's now the right time for me to vote, you should be able to vote. It shouldn't be a case of you're being held back because you've got the walls in there, you've got bars, you've got these barriers. I think you should be able to express yourself.
I think it's a good point, but I think if say there's a recent case in Scotland where two prisoners tried to get the right to vote and they were told no, they cannot have the right to vote, this is by the Supreme Court, and they cannot vote in the referendum either. And one of them was a murderer. One of them murdered a 7-year-old girl. Why should he be given any rights at all?
Again, there's all types of bad people in prison. There's people that have even done things worse than what you've said. But if you're looking to reform yourself, if you're looking to improve, if you're truly sorry for what you've done, I do feel you should start trying to demonstrate those things. And possibly one of the ways to demonstrate the reforming of his person is to go forward and say, I want to be a positive member of society.
Suppose he doesn't want to be. Suppose that particular person doesn't really want to change, but just wants to, because he's got nothing else to do in prison, just try and make a fuss and to try and get a vote because he wants the publicity. But really, because he's got life in prison. So if you've got life in prison, should you be given the right to vote?
Okay. I would say it would be very disappointing for me if I knew people were taking that attitude, that I just want to make a fuss, that I just want a publicity stunt. But I do feel that you should still be given the right, simply because the rules that govern you are made by people. These are people that have the power to determine whether you're given snacks in between your 3 meals a day in prison. I do feel that you should have some say on that. I don't want to go
Are you quite, because you're a support worker, do you feel that you're quite soft in this area? Because even you mentioned prison food. Prison food is more regulated than hospital food. Should prisoners be given better food than those people in hospital?
No, I don't feel prisoners should be getting better food or any privileges better than people on the outside, because again they are serving punishment. And again, I am very strong on most issues, and definitely strong on crime, and definitely strong on people serving punishments. But what I don't feel you should do is almost isolate the majority, because there is a minority in prison who may be wanting to have a laugh, have a joke, have a real big chuckle at the system's expense. I do feel that the overall majority of people would like to reform themselves, and I don't feel enough is done in prisons to reform people. I've visited prisons on numerous occasions myself, and what I see in there is not enough learning, not enough social understanding. And if you look at the reasons a lot of people are in prisons, it's because they didn't know how to function in society. So
do you think voting is fundamental to that?
I think voting is very important. Not enough people do it on the outside. Not enough people do it on the outside. But it doesn't now mean to say that we should block people doing it who are inside. We shouldn't do that. We need to encourage it more in general as a whole. As a whole country, as a whole nation, it needs to be encouraged. So,
how about young people? I mean, maybe there should be more around education and young people, because I mean, I think it's a stretch to say that if you're in prison, especially if you're serving life, that you should be given those rights to vote. Because so what if they vote? Really, then the local councillor or the local MP is not going to go and visit them in prison.
Okay, again, even if they do vote, I mean, I'm starting to wonder what it is the politicians are afraid of. I mean, there's 85,000 people in prison in England and Wales. If you divide that up between the constituencies, you're looking at maybe 100 votes. It's not going to...
Well, no, not really, because the majority of prisoners will be in certain areas. So you'll have certain areas where actually probably more prisoners will vote as a block than any other group outside, because they've got nothing else to do. There'll be this hour for them voting. So the prisoners, you could be in the situation where the prisoners could actually determine who the MP is. Does that mean that MPs then would need to... How would that work?
No, and this is how it wouldn't work the way you're saying it's going to work. I would look at it almost as when somebody goes to university, they can still vote for the constituency they was at before.
Only if they register there. So you have to register, basically you have to register where you are on the electoral register, where you're going to vote.
Yeah, but no, what I don't want you to do, or the public to do, is start to look at prison as some sort of permanent state. I do understand there is people in there for life, but even life is around 25 years. I do understand, and I don't, again, want you to think I'm being soft on the issue, but you should be voting for the things you believe in. You should be doing these things, and it shouldn't be a case of you're looking at prison where there's, at that moment, that's where their constituency is. That's the wrong way to look at it.
So you want prisoners to be registered to vote where they lived before going to prison, so that it's spread around. And then how would you, because what happens is politicians need to appeal to the electorate. And they need to, the electorate should then be reading their manifesto, etc. How would you see that working?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for politicians. Politicians to understand why people are in these situations. Politicians should be actually going into many different walks of life. They should be going into the prisons and getting an understanding of why these people are in these situations, and looking at serving their constituents out there and saying, the reason these people are in prison is because of this. I don't want you to go down this road. I don't want that for my constituency. There's a great opportunity for education.
But do you have to give prisoners the vote to be able to capture that?
You don't necessarily have to do that, but I think it would be the best way to do it, simply because it's a genuine process at that point. It's not, because I think it would be a publicity stunt almost if you did have the MP going into prison saying, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to stop things happening in my community. But if they really did have to appeal to particular people, then it would.
I think it'd be quite shocking if all of a sudden politicians started going into prisons to try and get the vote. I think it would be really shocking. But do you think so you think your young people that you're dealing with, do you think are they keen to vote now?
I think many of them are keen to vote, especially at 16 and around that type of age. And what I would say to you is it'd be very engaging to see politicians going into places that you don't usually see them. The stereotypical view of a politician are these people that don't get their hands dirty, that don't mix with the real day-to-day people. We've had a caller calling in earlier talking about feeling the need for crime because of how bad things are. And a lot of people are in prisons for those reasons. You must, I think, as a politician, try to get a whole varied experience rather than what we tend to see on the TV, what we tend to read about. And it's disappointing that these things aren't actually happening now. I take it that far. It's disappointing that you're not already going to different places. I mean...
But politicians do go to different places. So you do experience different things, you do go to different places, you do go to schools. You don't often go to prisons. I didn't go to many prisons as a politician, but as a magistrate, that's different. So as politicians, they do go to places. But in a way, if you've done a crime like murder and you're in prison, you're serving a punishment for something that you've done. Yes, it's maybe good to learn your backstory, but the bad people always tend to get more attention than the good people. Shouldn't there be focus beyond the people who are trying and striving to keep themselves out of prison?
I think we actually need to focus on everybody, good and bad. There needs
But
to
how
be...
can you can't focus on everybody equally because you don't have enough time in the day.
Okay, again, what I think needs to be happening is some sort of focus, some sort of plan, almost. We see committees for so many different things. We see task force put together for a wide range of things. But what we don't want to do is neglect certain people in society.
And ultimately, we want to keep the young people, especially the young people that you're going to be supporting, out of prison.
And that is really important.
Yeah.
And again, you want an understanding of why these people are in these situations. And what I would say to you is one of the things I found is a lot of people that can stop young people going off the rails. As I told you myself, when I speak to young people, they recognize me as young myself. They don't see me as the older generation. And it's almost somebody who is close to going down that prison route. They need to speak to people that have the relevant experience.
Do you think that young people should be going into prisons to see what it's like?
No, I was even going to take it to the point of there almost needs to be more meetings of people that have come out of prison that are trying to change their life and expressing to young people this is not the way forward to go. Like, for example, if David Cameron was to walk down Harlesden High Street with a message about staying out of gangs, staying out of trouble, no one's going to take him seriously.
No, I think he'd probably be scared to walk down Harlesden High Street.
Well, I don't know. I know he's got security. David Cameron's got real serious backing. So I don't actually know about that. I just think he wouldn't want to go down Harlesden High Street. He just doesn't want to associate with those people. And that's what I'm really trying to get home. He wouldn't be taken seriously because we know he doesn't mix in those circles. He pretty much refuses to. He just doesn't do it. But let's say he was now to go to Wormwood Scrubs prison. Even if he did make it a bit of a media event, if he did speak to people and try to look at the reasons, then he took a message to Harlesden High Street, that message would be much more greatly received at that point. I think these things have to happen. But again, the Prime Minister, he has an attitude of, it makes him feel sick, the idea of prisoners getting a vote. That is just purely negative coming from the PM. What he at that point should be saying is we need to investigate the bigger issues. We need to see what's going on and why it's
I think we've got a caller on the line. Good evening.
Hi.
Good evening. And what's your name and what's your question?
My name is Mila. I'm calling from Hamza. First, I would say that your show is amazing and you're doing really good work and I commend it.
Thank you.
My comment is the topic of having all these benefit cuts and government sort of taking a step back in how they help the communities who aren't able to help themselves is quite devastating. And I think that if they were to take away all the support, then it would leave us in a critical condition, a condition that would mean we won't be able to help ourselves and would put us in the same line as the Americans, where the poverty levels is insane. And it's not as if a lot of these people aren't looking for drugs and they aren't you know, trying to do all these things. I think it's absolutely absurd. And your other point about whether prisoners should be able to vote, I think it goes against the human rights, you know. A lot of these people who have only committed one crime and hopefully are able to come out in a few years' time, and a lot of them are young. It doesn't show that they have a second chance, and it doesn't make them a part of the community, and it doesn't allow them to integrate into society. It's showing them, you know, you don't have the same rights as everyone else. You're irrelevant. And and the other caller before who mentioned that all the benefit cuts would lead to people being criminalized a lot more. It's relevant, the 2 points, you know, it sort of becomes a cycle. So yeah.
Okay, well, great. Thank you very much for your comments and your statements. We've only got sort of 3 minutes left to the show. So, but I suppose the whole thing is, as the caller said, linked in terms of the government criminalising people, forcing people into crime. And then you go into crime and then you get your rights taken away. I must say, I don't think we're going to agree on the votes.
But to me, it seems like at that point you were talking about almost an abandonment. The government put these people in this situation and then they go to prison. And then once they're in prison, almost forget about them. No votes,
rehabilitation is key. I'm not quite sure that voting is an essential part of rehabilitation. I would say that reading and writing is an essential part of rehabilitation, because lots of people go into prison without those skills and mental health problems. And I think focus should be around those areas, and time and effort should be more put into those areas than voting, because to be able to vote, you have to be informed. So that means you then have to inform prisoners.
Let's get them to that stage, Dawn. That's what I'm saying. Let's
you have to
go all the way through.
But let's inform the people outside of prison that I don't think are informed enough, because it gets quite complicated, as you say, where they live, etc., etc. But it's been a great pleasure speaking to you and having your positivity, because you exude positivity.
Thank you. And that's what we've got to do.
And I think that's really important. And ultimately, I think the work that you do with young people and the work that you do as a support worker will hopefully keep those people and those young people out of prison. And that's what we want. That's what we need. We need to keep people out of prison. So, Arran, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me,
and I wish you all the best for the future. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you again next week for another edition of Live with Dawn Butler. The debate continues on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. As always, Star Media Corp, # Live with Dawn Butler. So continue the debate, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you.